Hello, I'm Katie from We Are Improv. Thank you very much for attending today's workshop, which is Lesson Plan Your Improv. I really appreciate you coming. So, my first step into the world of teaching was when I was around 14, 15 years old. And at school in PE, I did a short course called Junior Sports Leadership Award.
So I attended this and learned how to teach PE. And through that, you had to do some volunteering, and I did it in my drama department at school and started teaching there. So that's how I kind of initially started doing lesson planning. So I started my drama lessons at age 8 and did a bit of improv there. And then at 16, joined an improvisation group and started performing locally. And then in 2009, me and a group of friends that had done improv decided to start our own group. And we had lots of fun. We had really, really good audience numbers, but we completely and utterly lacked direction. We would turn up once a week, usually at somebody's house or somebody's parents' house. And we had no plans. So we'd spend about half an hour just chatting, having a drink, catching up with each other. And then we'd do a few games. And that was it, basically. We had no aim, no direction. And it ended up with the group getting frustrated. People started to get annoyed. Nobody felt like they were growing. Nobody was challenged. So I started doing a little bit of lesson planning then. And then that gave us an idea, because if you're in a group already and you all just rock up and have a bit of fun, you've got no idea, and you're not discussing where you want to go. You've got no ideas about how to grow, how to develop. Do you want to do short form? Do you want to do long form? Do you want to perform at theatres? This sort of thing. So that's why I think that lesson planning is so important. So that group fizzled out because people had kids, people got other hobbies. So in 2011, I decided to start up my own improv group. So Lancaster, where I'm from, is in the northwest of England. And there's back in 2011, there was very little improv here. And I could get a train for an hour to Manchester. It's 2.5 hours to London. So if I wanted to improvise, I had to either travel or I had to start up my own group. So that's what I did. I started from scratch and put up the posters, got people to come along, and slowly built the improv group up, which was amazing. It's been an incredible 10 years so far. We've performed regularly in Lancaster and in improv festivals around the UK and Ireland. And then in 2017, I had my first improv baby. So me and my partner, Tom, we met at an improv class. And then we had our second improv baby in 2020. And one thing I do warn people is if you're an improviser and you have a baby with another improviser, you end up with a child that is 200% improv. You know, I spend the vast majority of my day not being Mummy, not being Katie, being a character from Paw Patrol or Disney or something. So that's just a little word of warning. So I spent the last couple of years kind of being a little bit out of the improv game because I was focusing on being a mummy. But now I've been teaching online, and I'm going to be launching Patreon in September, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. So who is this workshop for? So it's for people out there that want to create an improv community where they live. So like me, you're living on an improv island, there's just you or just a few of you, and you want to build that community. It's also for people out there that are already in improv groups and you want to develop your group, you want to grow, you want to expand, you want to challenge yourselves. And also for anybody out there that's already an improv teacher that wants to pick up a couple of extra hints and tips. So I always think that the best thing to do when you're writing a lesson plan is to start with a theme or an aim. So this is what you want this lesson to be built on. And this is going to be different depending on who you're teaching. So if this is you teaching a beginners group, you might decide that this first lesson you want to work on yes-anding. So that's your overall theme is yes and, or it might be working on making your partner look good or something like that. If you're an established group, you might think, right, this lesson, we're going to work on characterization, or we're going to work on stage presence. So the first thing you do is pick the theme or the aim, and then you can build your whole lesson plan around that one idea. So you split the lesson plan into 3 parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end. So the beginning is your introduction and warm-ups. So you set the scene for the upcoming workshop and warm up the class ready for the rest of the lesson. And then the middle is where you do the exercises. So this is the time to do the exercises that are focused around the aim of the lesson. So maybe you're doing characterization. This is where you do exercises on getting into character. And then the final part is the ending, which is the practice and closing the lesson. So this is where you can use the skills that you've been practicing and end the lesson. So the beginning, I'd recommend if you're doing a 90-minute class, this is probably going to be about 15 minutes. If you're doing a class that's 2 hours, this might be about 20 minutes. Now, this is all just the way I do it, and it's just a guidance to get you started, and you can build it, change it. You might find it works differently for you. So the introduction is where you tell the class on what you're going to be focusing on today. And it's also a good time to give a little bit more detail about you and about the values, rules, procedures, fire escapes, that sort of thing. And then the warm-ups, they should be fun and allow the class to relax, to connect, and to forget about the outside world. It's so easy for everybody to come in and you've rushed to get to your improv class. You've had a bad day at work, you've had an argument with somebody in the family, and it's a chance to just try and stop that, put that to one side and let people be present in the room. So the warm-ups, they can relate to the aim of the lesson, but they really don't have to. It can just purely be about warming up. So the introduction, I'd recommend about 5 minutes, no matter what. And obviously this varies depending on if you are doing this for a beginners group, say, or whether it's your regular group that you meet up with your team. So if it's a beginners group, you want to introduce yourself, maybe give a little bit of background about who you are, what your experience is. And you might want to get the class to introduce themselves as well. That's completely up to you. You might want them to just say a little bit, hello, who they are, what they've come to the class for maybe. And you're going to also give the focus of the class. So you'll say that this session we're going to be looking at yes anding, we're going to be looking at making your partner look good. It's also a really good time to give a little bit of information about your class ethos and values. So for me, I had an improv teacher a very long time ago who was unfortunately quite negative and struggled to give any feedback that wasn't critical. So I found that really difficult. So now as a teacher, I'm incredibly positive, incredibly encouraging, incredibly supportive, and I actually give very little feedback. I feel that people, if you give them the positive feedback, tell them where they went right, what they did really well, they will work out where they need to improve themselves. I think they'll naturally feel it. So I always start my classes by, telling people that it's a positive, supportive environment, that it's encouraging, that we're here to support each other, have fun, enjoy ourselves. And there's a class out there, a group out there that I know that they specialize in neurodiversity. So at the beginning of their classes, they probably want to give a little nod towards neurodiversity, how they adapt their lessons to help people. And then you might also, if it's a new group, want to just go through some venue information, where the toilets are, where the fire exits are, those sort of things. And if you're a regular group, then this is probably where you might put a bit of your group news. So you've got this upcoming show, and this is the person that's volunteered to do the posters, all these little bits of information that you might just want to set out before you start the main body of the class. And then you move on to the warm-up games. So you can tailor the warm-up games to suit your group. So I reckon about 10 minutes if it's a 90-minute session, and then about 15 minutes or so if it's a 2-hour session. So some of the things you might want to achieve in a warm-up is purely having fun and giggling. It's a nice way to start your improv lesson, is getting yourselves just to have fun and laugh. It's also a really good time to help ease nerves of beginners, especially to make them feel reassured, make them feel that they're okay, that they're in a safe environment, that they're going to have a good time. It's a good place as well to encourage relaxation, forgetting about the outside world. Because as I was saying, we're all busy people. We can come in stressed and rushing and late. So this is where you can forget about what's happened. And it's a good place as well to physically warm up, to do something that's a physical exercise. So one that I like to play when it's in real life and not on Zoom is you. So you point at somebody, say you, and you walk to take their place in the circle. The person you've pointed to, they then point to somebody else and say you, and take their place in the circle. So it's just a nice physical, energetic game. It's also a really good place to connect as a group. If you're an established team, this is one that you might like to work together on. So it might be a game where you're clapping and you're connecting and clapping at the same time. So these games are fun, they are enjoyable, they don't need to be related to the overall aim. These are just about having fun, warming up, getting everybody ready for the main part. So this moves us on to the middle. So this is what the part that I call the exercises. So this is where you practice the skills that you want to achieve. So you practice the characterization, you practice the yes anding, you practice stage presence, whatever you feel that you want to work on, whether that's as a, with your beginners or a class that you're teaching, or whether that's with your group. So I'd recommend that the middle's probably about 30 minutes for a 90-minute session and about 40 minutes for a 2-hour session. So, but that's again completely up to you. So the exercises, you want to mix up your exercises. If you do the same kind of exercise over and over, the same format, then people are probably going to get a bit bored. It won't have the same effect. So if you can mix it up with solo exercises, exercises in pairs, exercises as a group, that just keeps the session flowing nicely. It helps people feel connected, keeps them engaged. And you want to make sure that every member of the class has a turn. So say if you've decided that you want to work on, try not to say too much. Your overall theme is talking too much. So you could play a nice exercise where you have 2 people on stage and they're only allowed to say 1 word each. So that's a nice group game in pairs. You could do that either having them doing that around the room at the same time, or you can have them performing it. So you've always got that option as well with the exercises, that they can be going on at the same time, spread out across the room, or they can be doing that as almost as a performance so everybody else can see and watch. So you want to make sure that everybody has a go. So when you're beginning, it is completely and utterly normal to be nervous about running a class. When I've been teaching for 10 years now, and if I have a beginners class or people that are new in the class, I still feel nervous. So if you need to write down the name of everybody in the class and tick them off for each exercise, that's fantastic. If that helps you to keep it running, keep it going steady, then that's great. So you might want to ask for volunteers for your exercise. You might want to say, right, we're going to do a yes and scene, and I want 2 people, and then 2 people can go up and do it, and then obviously everybody else in the group will do it as well. Or you might want to choose pairings. As an improv teacher, if you're working with people, especially a group that you regularly teach or your own group, you might know that 2 people don't work together very often, or that this person will bring out the best in the other person, or they'll bring out the best in each other, or this person is quiet and that person's quiet, so I'll put them together and then they'll actually have room to talk. Because you can have it quite often where you have, some members of the group that are very talkative, very loud, very dominant. So you might want to choose to cherry pick who you want to do certain exercises together. And a great way to find new exercises, you can find them online. Improv Encyclopedia's got loads from improv groups, and also from improv books, and from attending other classes. And, be creative with your exercises. It's really easy to get stuck in a rut and just end up doing the same exercises week on week. But we need to mix it up and find some different ones. And you can choose as well, like the level of feedback you want to give. So like for me personally, I don't give that much, but maybe if you're a group that work together, an improv team that works together regularly, you might want to give more feedback. You might want to give some pointers and say, oh, well, I really liked it when you did this. I thought this was really clever. I thought that was really creative. Maybe you could do this differently. And always make sure that you explain the aim of you can explain the aim of the exercise if you want. If you've got a beginners group, going through the really, minute details of why you want to do this exercise might be lost on them. They probably don't need to know why you're doing a 2-word story. They don't need to know that. But if you're working on something as a group and you're doing, say, characterization, you might want to explain why you can mess around with the voice. So we're going to do an exercise now, say, that is about characterization. We're going to focus on voice. So we're going to do some scenes where you're going to be talking very high pitch, some scenes where you're going to be low pitch, and you can explain about how making that choice when you step off stage to just do one thing, with your voice, can give you a character as soon as you set off. So you can explain some things in more detail if you want, or less detail if you feel that that's needed. So that leads us on to the end of the session. So I predominantly teach long form improvisation. I started off doing short form, and we did short form games. We did some ridiculous short form games. We had one where we filled the entire stage with mouse traps, and 2 brave souls used to get blindfolded and do a scene where they stood on mouse traps. But nowadays I've moved on to long form because I found that that's my real passion. So the way I normally work a session is we have the beginning, so the introduction and the warm-ups, and then we'll have the middle section where we'll work on something like the characterization, might be stage presence, it might be storytelling, it might be narrative structures, and then we move on to the end of the session, which is where we practice a long form. So where we actually do the structure, and that's trying to use the things that you've learned in the middle section in the actual ending. So I'd recommend about 45 minutes or so for this in a 90-minute class, and about 60 minutes for a 2-hour class. So this is where you're using the things that you learn in a real improv practice. So if you were teaching a beginners group, you might do exercises based around yes-anding, and then you might spend the last bit of the session trying some improv games. So you might try alphabet conversation, you might try Foursquare, you might try all these little games and use the yes-anding that you've learned. Or if you're an established group, this might be where you practice your performance. So you practice the long form or whatever you're going to do. So the practice part of the ending, I'd say about 40 minutes maybe for a 90-minute session, and about 45 minutes for a 2-hour session. So again, if you were just doing short form, this is where you play the games. If you were doing long form, this might where you just do scenes, or where you do the format. And you're trying to practice what you've been learning. So depending on you and how you feel and how the group is, you might want to side coach during this, give positive encouragement, remind them what they've learned. So if you're doing, if you're just going to do some scenes and you've been doing the working on characterization, before somebody goes on stage, you might say, oh, remember to go on with a voice. Remember to go on and move your body into a different physicality. So you can side coach and give some encouragement about, just to remind them what you've been learning. And you can also give some side coaching mid-scene, mid-game, mid-performance, depending on if that's how you work, especially as a group. That might be something you're really comfortable with. And then you want to close the session. So generally, again, just like the introduction, this is about 5 minutes long. So there's loads of different ways on closing. So you could just be as simple as just saying, thank you, everybody. Well done. You've been brilliant tonight. See you next week. It could just be as simple as that. Finish it, done. Or you might want to play a game. Like some teachers, some groups like to do a game just to kind of wrap everything up, get everybody back into a circle and get everybody together again, just to play a short, silly game. You might also want to get everybody together and have a little chat about what your favourite moment was in the game, in the evening, or what you learned today. So some people, some teachers, some groups find that really helpful, really useful. And with a beginners group, that might be something that's a bit scary for people. So it's a lot about reading your group, reading the room. And you also might want to celebrate with each other. So high-fiving, elbow bumping, hugging, social distancing dependence. So with my groups, we used to say well done and thank you and give each other a hug. That was kind of our little signature ending. And then you also might want to just pop in at this point any details of the next session, your next rehearsal, your next show. So at the end of, probably over the weekend, I'll email you out this free lesson plan PDF. So you can just print it off or edit it and type in. So it's just got a few simple things. So it's got the date, it's got the lesson name. The lesson name is completely up to you. You could have a lesson that is just called Beginners Week 1, or you could have one that is called The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. You can be as creative and as inventive as you want, but that's entirely up to you. And then class, so whether that's a beginners group, whether it's an advanced group. And then you've got your introduction and your warm-ups. So that's what we discussed as the beginning of the session. And then you've got your exercises, which is the middle, and then the practice and closing, which is the end. So I'll send these out along with the video, and you can have a go at practicing your own lesson plans. So just a few extra thoughts from me. So you do you. This is you teaching, it's your improv lessons, it's your improv group. You will figure out what works for you. This is just what works for me. Some of it you can cherry pick. You can say that bit is amazing, or that bit I don't think would work with our group. So this is completely up to you how you do it. So you can focus on timings as well, as much or as little as you need. So when I first started, I was really quite scared about timings. They made me quite anxious to not know what I was doing. So I would have every single exercise and game had a time next to it so that I could teach, and I'd have my lesson plan next to me and I'd look down and go, right, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So you can do that if you want, or you might want to just kind of have a rough guide. It really depends on you as a person and how you feel about that. And also it's okay to improvise. We are improvisers, and you might be teaching a class and a game is going really well. The class are really enjoying it. There's lots of laughs. People are doing really well. So you might want to extend it. You might want to do that for 5-10 minutes longer. Or you might be in the middle of an improv lesson and you might go, this room isn't feeling it. This isn't going how I thought it was going to. They're quite low on mood, low on energy. So I'm going to cut that game altogether. The lesson plan is there to help you. It's there to aid you. But it doesn't have to be a rigid thing. You can adapt and change it as much as you want. And your lessons will evolve over time. You'll get more confident with teaching, so you won't feel as much need to rely on it as a hold it in your hands all the time, and that's great. And also remember to keep your lesson plan safe, because I stumbled across recently a beginner's course that I'd written. I'd written 6 lessons, and I'd written out all my lesson plans, and I found them, and I had another beginner's course coming up. So that was wonderful. You know, I didn't have to do loads and loads of work. I could just tweak it. So when you've written lesson plans, keep them. You never know when you might want to teach that lesson again. And it's very, like I said, it's very normal to feel nervous. You know, if you're teaching for the first time, or even if you're in an established group now and you decide that you're going to do a lesson plan, it's really normal to feel nervous. That's okay. It's good. It shows that you care. So if you are feeling nervous, you know, just take a few deep breaths and give yourself a break. You know, it's a hard thing to do. Teaching can be quite difficult, but it's also, you know, one of the most rewarding things that you can possibly do. And if you are an established group, you might want to share the teaching. You might have one person in the group that loves it, that's a really good teacher. You're all really impressed with them. They enjoy it, you enjoy it, and that's fine. But if you don't, then try sharing it out. You don't want resentments to build. If there's one poor person that every week spends time lesson planning and it's all put on them, you know, they're not going to be happy. So try and share it out. Another thing that you'll need to improvise with is when you're teaching and you don't have as many people as you thought you were going to get, or you thought you were going to have more. So when you sit down to do your lesson plan, you might be thinking, right, I've got 8 people for this today. So I'm going to do, we're going to do scenes in 2s, and then one person doesn't turn up, and then you've got 7. So then you have to try and switch around who's working with who, or how many one exercise you're going to do. So that's something to just be aware of, that you might have to make those little bits of changes. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for attending today and for coming along to this workshop. You know, I really appreciate it. It means an awful lot to me, and I really hope that it's been of value to you. So this is my Facebook. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram, and that's our website. I am always happy to chat improv. You know, if you come away from this and you think, I should have asked that, then please just drop me a message and I'll help if I can. And then just before I wrap up, and we'll lead on to the Q&A session, I'm just letting you know that I'm going to be starting a Patreon account in September. And it's going to be £9 a month, and it's aimed at people in improv groups, especially improv groups that are far away from other improvisers and the improv hubs out there, and also for people wanting to start their own improv groups. So every month I'll be posting PDF lesson plans for courses. So I will do maybe a 6-week beginners course, and it will give you week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can take that away and you can teach it. And there'll be lesson plans for standalone workshops as well. And I'll also do video lessons. So it'll be me talking just like this, and then you can pause it, do the exercise, do the game, press play, and I'll tell you what the next one is. There'll also be monthly Q&A sessions from me and other people in the We Are Improv patron community, where we can discuss things that we're learning, things that we're having problems with, and try and share them together. We'll have voting on what you'd want upcoming lesson plans to be on. And then there'll be extras, things like, you know, how to find a rehearsal venue, how to promote your show and course, you know, because over the 10 years, I've learned a lot. You know, we've had loads of things, like we booked a rehearsal venue and they put us next door to the silent meditators. That was an interesting one where we're all running around shouting, laughing, and the poor people next door are silent meditating. So it's going to be £9 a month, and I just wanted to let you know about that. So again, thank you so much for attending. I'm going to stop the recording now, and then we can just have a chat and I'll answer any questions that I can. So thank you very much.